Okay, so the first assignment you will be applying many of the concepts that we've been learning about. Okay, so it's due in 3 weeks. Okay, so it's due 3 weeks from today, before class. Okay, so if you hand it in 1 minute later than 8, so if you hand it in at 8:30, that's a day late. Okay, so get it in on time. So here is what the assignment is. So your task is to create a virtual ATM, a bank machine, right, using C# in Visual Studio. You can create either a Forms project or a console project. However, a Forms project is highly recommended. Okay. So this bank, this is a it's not a very realistic bank, but we're just you guys are practicing. So this bank is a little unique in that it only has one user. Okay, only has one account. And so consequently, obviously the bank machine only has one username as well. Okay, so the user, the single user. Here we can change this. One username. Yeah. So the user has two accounts, savings and checkings. So you should ask. The program should ask you for a bank number and a password, and check it against a bank number and password stored for your single user. Okay? So before you're allowed to see any bank balances or do any withdrawals or deposits, it should ask you for a username and password, and it should check against the username and password stored in your program. Okay? So once the user has logged in, your program should give the user the option to check the balance. Here, why don't I put this in a list form? Check the balance, deposit money, withdraw money, transfer money to another account, and change their password. Okay. So these are all the things that your program has to do. Okay? Your password changing function should enforce a basic password rule that the password has to be at least 8 characters long. Okay? So if the user tries to change their password to something that's shorter than 8 characters, then it shouldn't allow that. Shouldn't allow it. Okay? So obviously your program isn't going to distribute real money. Right? This is just a simulation. But your program, the readouts, the information that your program displays, should pretend that it is. Right? So if you withdraw $100 from your bank account, then the balance in whatever account you that you withdrew from should reflect that transaction. Right? Same if you deposit. If you deposit in $1 million, then you should have an extra $1 million in your account, right? What else? What else? So the thing you don't have to create a database for this assignment. So that means you can store all the information in variables. So it's okay if your program resets every time you start it. So if I run your program, deposit $1 million, or let's say, so I run your program, there's $100 in there. I deposit $1 million, and then I stop your program and restart it again. It's okay if it's back to 100 now. But it should maintain its state throughout a single session, right? So if I run your program, check the balance, it says $100, I deposit $1 million, then I check the balance again, it should say $1,100,000, right? But it's okay if it resets between program runs, okay? So you should try and make your program fairly robust. So what that means is that it shouldn't be crashing all the time, right? So, or it should give proper error messages. For example, if the user tries to withdraw too much money, right? Let's say you have 100 and you try and withdraw 500. It shouldn't let you. It should give you an error, right? It should say, oh, you don't have that much money in your account. Or, if you try and, I suppose that's okay. You don't have to check types because we haven't looked at exception handling yet. But you should at least, you shouldn't allow someone to withdraw money they don't have. Okay? Any questions about the assignment? So I'm just going to I just save this. I'm going to upload this saved version. So that is due in 3 weeks, okay? So don't procrastinate on this. You should start right away, okay? Because if you work on it an hour a day, it's not going to seem like very much work. But if you wait until the last couple of days, then you're going to panic, and it's going to seem like it's too big, and then you won't be able to do it, because it will be too much, right? It's going to take you a couple of hours, at least 10 hours to do this, depending on how much you struggle. Okay? So be prepared to dedicate some time to this stuff, right? You can't learn this stuff without practicing. Programming is just like learning to play a musical instrument. How many of you play a musical instrument? Yeah, what do you play?
Guitar.
The guitar? Yeah, electric, acoustic?
Electric.
Yeah, okay. So I couldn't just explain to you how to play guitar, right? I can't say you put your fingers on the frets and I couldn't tell you all the chord positions. I can't just tell you that. If I did, would you be able to go and play? No. I could tell you, but then you have to go and practice and spend hours and hours and hours and hours, right? Same thing with programming. It's very much a skill that you need to learn through experience. Okay, so that's why we give you these assignments. These lectures are just to sort of introduce you to the concepts. Your brain's really going to suck it all up when you work on the assignment. Okay, and you're really going to become proficient in this stuff. Okay, so if there's no questions on the assignment, I'll just leave it there. It's posted in the Dropbox. It's due in 3 weeks. Okay, and as start early and come see me early. Ask me for questions early. If you ask me for questions, if you ask me questions the night before, I probably won't be able to help you, right? But if you ask me next week, we could probably find an hour or two where I could sit down and I could help you out. Okay? So sooner rather than later is the message of the day. Okay. So today. So I uploaded the slides for today. We're going to learn about looping today. Okay, this is where we really start to see the power of computers. Okay, this is where conditional statements are fine. They're very powerful. You can't really program without them. Same with variables. But looping really gives it its power. It's like the gasoline of programming. Okay, it's going to give us big power that will allow us to do things that we could not do without a computer, right? So when I'm working on my PhD thesis right now, and I'm analyzing a lot of data, and I use programming all the time to crunch these numbers, right? I have millions and millions, literally millions of numbers, okay? And using loops, I can go through all those and process all that data. Now imagine if I had to do that by hand. Okay, I could never do it. It would take me my entire lifetime. Okay, but the looping, computers and looping gives me the power to do these things. Okay, almost in the blink of an eye. So take a look at the slides because we're going to be following those somewhat today. So let's open up a Visual Studio project. Let's go back here. So this is class 4 demo looping. Okay, so we open up Visual Studio. So we're going to open up a forms project. We're going to create a forms project. So I hope everyone remembers how to do that. So we're going to start a new project, and we're going to change our folder to looping, and we're going to call this class for looping. Okay. So we're going to learn, I'm going to try and introduce some new UI elements as well that you'll probably need for your assignment. Okay. So let's think about looping in general. Let's say, let's think of an algorithm. Let's say you were going to tell someone, let's say you wanted to tell someone to stack a set of plates. Okay? Let's say you're a manager at a restaurant. Okay? And you have a dishwasher that you're supervising. And you need the dishwasher to stack the clean plates. Okay? So would it be more efficient for you to say, basically tell the dishwasher, okay, stack that plate, 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 right? One at a time for each plate. That would work, right? Eventually the plates would get stacked, right? But is that a very efficient way of doing it? No. What you should say is stack all those plates, right? And then basically the dishwasher will execute a loop, right? Or you might say stack each plate until there's no plates left to stack, right? So each time the dishwasher can say, okay, what do I do now? Okay, there's plates left, so I'll stack one. Okay, what do I do now? It says to keep stacking them until there's no plates left. Okay, I'll stack one more plate. Okay, what should I do now? Well, there's still plates left. I have to stack them, right? And so that goes on and on and on and on. That's a loop, right? That's essentially a loop, and we can do that in code. We can do that with our code, okay? So if you ever find yourself doing something on the computer that's very tedious, that's very repetitive, there's probably an easy way to do it with a loop. Okay? So we're going to look at looping today. So some of the objectives, we're going to learn how to use something called a while loop. So there are really two types of loops. Okay? There are while loops and there are for loops. Okay, let's make these big. Okay, so the basic structure of a while loop is that it kind of looks like an if statement. Okay, so you remember when we had our if statement, we had if, and then we had our brackets, and then inside we had a conditional statement, right? And then we had some braces, and then inside here, inside the braces, this code would run, right, only if this was what? Well, if it was true, right? So now the while loop is similarly structured. Okay, so we use the keyword while, okay, instead of if, and again, just like in the if statement, we're going to put a conditional statement in here. Okay? We're going to put a conditional statement. And then also like the if statement, we're going to have two braces. And there's going to be code here. Okay? And what will happen is that this code in here will continuously run. Will run over and over and keep iterating over and over and over and over again while this condition is true. Okay? So that's a simple form. Okay. So we're gonna learn about while loops. We're also gonna learn about for loops. They're essentially the same thing, except their syntax is a little bit different because they're built for a different reason, and I'll explain the details of that in a minute. We're gonna look at nested loops. So what you can actually do is you can put a loop inside a loop, just like you can put ifs inside ifs. You can put loops inside loops like this. So we'll get rid of this. You can see this on one page. What did I do here? So this will be like this. So we can have a loop inside a loop. This is called a nested loop. Okay? What else are we going to look at? That's probably it. That'll take us through most of the class, I think. We'll look at how to do loops. Okay, let's go to it. Let's go right to our form. So what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce a new type of element. Or no, I guess this we've used this already. But what I want to do is I'm going to change a property that we haven't adjusted yet, and that is the multi-line property. Okay? So I dragged in a text box, and then I'm going to go into properties, and I'm going to change multi-line from false to true. And now we can make it a multi-line text box. We can make it big like this. Okay? And let's actually move this up a little bit. And what we'll do is we'll put in a button here. Right? We like buttons. And we're going to change the label of the button by changing the text property. We'll call it Start Me Up. Okay? Everybody have that? I'll give you just a half second to do that. Okay, everybody. So make sure that you need a multi-line form because we're going to be printing lots of things to the screen. Okay. Anyone still not have a multi-line form? Let me know. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we're going to go into our button. And so adding text to the form is just the same like we've always done, right? So what we can do is we could say, so it's called text box 1. Okay. And we want to, I wonder if there's a function that actually, oh, yes there is. Excellent. So there's a couple of ways we can add text to our text box. So one is we could say text box text equals, and then we could put in some new text here. Okay? So let's say new text. Okay? So let's run that and see what happens when we do that. So now I'm going to hit our button, and see, I keep pressing it, but there's no new text added. Why is that? It's always just stays the same. See, the reason for that is because every time we press the button, we're just resetting the text to be the same. Okay? But now what we're going to do, we're going to use a method. We're going to use a function from the text box, okay, called append text. Okay? And what that's going to do is that's going to add text on. Okay? So we can put new text here. Okay? So let's run it by clicking start. And let's press this button. Let's press it again. Oh, there's some more text. And some more. Right? We can keep doing that on and on and on and on and on and on and on. Right? Okay, now let's do this. Let's get crazy. Let's use a while loop. Okay? So remember, when we use a while loop, so I want to fill up this text box with a whole bunch of new texts. Okay? So what I can do is I could say while true. Okay? And then I'll put my braces here. While true. So how many times will this little bit of code, how many times is that going to run? Yeah, an infinite number of times. It's just going to run over and over. And actually, I'm not sure if we're going to see the refreshes in the... oh, there we go. See? So, see now it's just going to keep filling up our text box for as long as I let it go. Okay? And eventually, it would fill up my memory. It would take a long time because I have a few gigs. Okay? So now the only way to stop it now is to stop the program. So let's go back to our form design, and let's put on, see here, one of the properties is scroll bars. So let's turn on the scroll bars for vertical. Okay, so now we can see exactly how much. So now when we add the text, now it's going, we can scroll, right? So now it's adding lots and lots of new text. Yep. What's it say? Does it give you an error? So, what if I don't want it to? What if I don't want it to loop forever? What if I just want it to loop 100 times? Well, without using a for loop. How would I do that? A variable? Okay, counter. I heard a couple good ideas. So we're going to use a variable to count how many times it loops. So where would I put that variable?
Outside the loop.
Yeah. So like what kind of variable? An int? Okay. So let's call it counter. So what value should I set it to?
0.
Okay. 0. So if I want my counter, if I want my loop to loop 100 times, how do I do that?
Counter plus plus.
Counter plus plus?
Yeah, inside the loop, and then but else what's on condition is while it's less than 100.
So the condition, where do I put the condition?
The brackets.
In here?
Yeah.
Okay, so what do I put? Counter. While counter is what? Less than 100? Okay. And then what else am I missing? Counter plus plus, right. Or I could say counter equals counter plus 1. What's that?
Because you said the loop will keep going unless it's true. So the counter now is equal to 0, so it's true.
Yep.
It's less than 100, so this loop couldn't run.
No, it'll run. It'll run 100 times. Because this is true right now. So this code inside here will run as long as this is true.
As long as it's
Yeah, and so it's true right now, right? And so let's iterate through it. Or let's run it first, and then we'll debug it and see exactly how it works. So let's run it. Okay? So we'll press it. Yank. So there's our 100 things, right? So we'll close it. But now let's debug it. Do you remember how do we debug? How do we insert a breakpoint? Yeah, we click on this little gray bar to insert a breakpoint, right? So let's put a breakpoint here, and let's run it. Okay? So we'll run our program. And here we go. I'll press step over. Okay? So let's inspect the value of counter. The value is 0, right? And so is 0 less than 100? Is 0 less than 100? Yes, it is. So this is going to... Okay. So, what if I don't want it to... what if I don't want it to loop forever? What if I just want it to loop 100 times?
For loop.
Well, without using a for loop. How would I do that? A variable? Okay, counter. I heard a couple good ideas. So let's see, we're going to use a variable to count how many times it loops. So where would I put that variable?
Outside the loop.
Yeah, so like what kind of variable? An int? Okay, so let's call it counter. So what value should I set it to?
0.
Okay, 0. So if I want my counter, if I want my loop to loop 100 times, how do I do that?
Counter plus plus.
Counter plus plus?
Yeah, inside the loop, and then but else what's on condition is while it's less than 100.
So the condition, where do I put the condition?
In the brackets.
In here?
Yeah.
Okay, so what do I put? Counter. While counter is what? Less than 100? Okay. And then what else am I missing? Counter plus plus, right. Or I could say counter equals counter plus 1.
I think it shouldn't be less than 100.
What's that?
Because you said the loop will keep going unless it's true. So the counter now is equal to 0, so it's true.
Yep.
It's less than 100, so this loop couldn't run.
No, it'll run. It'll run 100 times. Because this is true right now. So this code inside here will run as long as this is true.
As long as it's
Yep. And so it's true right now, right? And so let's iterate through it. Or let's run it first, and then we'll debug it and see exactly how it works. So let's run it. Okay. So we'll press it. Yank. So there's our 100 things, right? So we'll close it. But now let's debug it. Do you remember how do we debug? How do we insert a breakpoint? Yeah, we click on this little gray bar to insert a breakpoint, right? So let's put a breakpoint here and let's run it. Okay? So we'll run our program. And here we go. I'll press step over. Okay? So let's inspect the value of counter. The value is 0, right? And so is 0 less than 100? Is 0 less than 100? Yes, it is. So this is going to... Okay, I got to try and not press F10 because F10 stops my recording, but F10 is also next step. So I got to like tie my left hand behind my back. Okay, so we looked at counter. It's 0, so 0 is less than 100. So we're going to step over, and now we're going to run this. We're going to run through the block, okay? And now we're also going to add 1 to counter. So counter now. So this is going to loop back up to the top here, and it's going to check this Boolean condition again. So we're going to go back up. So counter equals 1. Is 1 less than 100? Yes, it is. So it's going to go in the method again. It's going to print more text. It's going to increment the counter. Counter is now 2. Okay? Now we're going to go back up, check the Boolean condition. Is 2 less than 100? Yes, it is. So we're going to go again, and we're going to append text. And should I do this 100 times? No, I don't think so. I think you guys are getting the idea, right? So now we'll take off this breakpoint and we'll continue. How do we? Oh, here we continue, and there we have our 100 iterations of, or 100 printings of new text. Okay. Okay, so let's close that. Okay, let's try this. How would I print out the numbers 1 to 100? Should I do this? Should I say append text and then go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Should I do that? That seems pretty repetitive, right? And what do we do when we want to do something that's repetitive? We use a loop, right? So how can we use a loop to print out the numbers 1 to 100?
You print it based on the counter number, based on the string of counter.
The string of counter? So what would I put in append text? Yeah, counter. But what do I have to do to counter in order to append it? I have to convert it to string. Okay? And then also I'm going to concatenate on a new line character. Okay? So then it's going to print each number on a new line. What's that? Yeah, so let's start from 1 here. Let's do this, change this to 1, and we'll change this to 101. Or we could keep it at 100, and we could make it less than equal to, and that'll do the same thing. Okay? This is probably a little more clear on what we're doing. So let's run it. Whoop. There we go. Okay. There's our loop. Why did I do what? Well, I changed it back to 100, but my goal was to print out. So here, let's put it in the comments. Print out the numbers 1 to 100, right? So I have to change it to 1, so that's the first number that gets printed. Sorry? You can set it equal to whatever you want, right? Yeah, so if our goal was to print out the numbers from 5 to 500, then what would we set this to be? 5. And what would we set this to be? 500, right? So let's see it now. Okay. So see the power? So let's have a race, right? You guys print 1 to 500 by writing 500 lines of code, right? And I'll print out 500 lines by using a loop. Who do you think's going to win? Me, by probably a factor of 100, okay, or more. So remember, if you find yourself doing something tedious, there's probably an easier way to do it with a loop, okay? That's the brilliance of programming, is loops. Okay, let's see. So we've looked at an infinite loop. We've looked at a loop that ends. Okay, so we're gonna learn. This is the main. Probably, or I wouldn't say the most common. There's sort of two common loop structures that we use in programming. Okay, so this is one, and normally, if we know how many times we want to run a loop, if we know exactly how many, so we know we want to run the loop exactly 300 times, or exactly 307 times. Okay, normally we don't use a while loop. We use while loops only when we're not too sure how long we're going to loop for, right? Like let's say we're processing a list of data, and we're not really sure how many items are in the list. We can use a while loop, and we just keep saying while there's another item to be processed. Keep going, right? But if we know the number, then there's actually a better loop structure to use. It's called a for loop. Okay? And it's a little more complex. So let's just take a look here at the general form. Okay? So we have our while loop. Now let's look at for loops. So for loops start with the keyword for, okay? And just like a while loop, you're going to have your parentheses, and then you're going to have your braces, okay? So just like in the while loop, the stuff that goes here, this stuff loops. So anything between the braces is going to loop, okay? But what goes in the brackets here, it's a little bit different now, okay? So now there's 3 things that go in the bracket, not just one, okay? So the first thing that goes in is the counter variable. Okay, that's the first thing. And then you separate that with a semicolon. And then we have the loop condition. Okay? And then I'm going to make this smaller so it all appear on one line. We have the loop condition, and then a semicolon, and then we have the iteration operation. Okay, so what basically what it's doing is it's taking. We've sort of made a for loop here. This is sort of a customized for loop, right? We've built our own. Okay, so what we've done now is we've put this in the first part of the for loop, right? So what we'll do is we'll say so for, and then we give it a variable. So usually we use the variable I. Okay, it's one of the only times when you should use a variable with a single letter. Okay, when you use a for loop, I. Okay, so you set that variable to some value, usually 0, and then this is the loop condition. So you're going to loop until while that condition is true. Right? So it's very similar to a while loop. It's just a little bit different. And then here, this is what you will do to the counter every time you iterate through the loop. Okay? So let's take a look at some actual code. So we'll go back here. So again, we use the keyword for, and then we have our parentheses and our brackets. Okay? And then the first thing we're going to put in our parentheses is our counter variable. So we're going to call it I, and we're going to set it to equal 0. Okay. Then we're going to separate that with a semicolon, and then we're going to put in the loop conditional statement. So we might say something like, while I is less than equal to 1,000. Okay. And then we'll separate that with a semicolon. And then beside this semicolon, what we're going to do is we're going to tell it what to do to I every time it loops. So usually we just use the short form I++. Okay? So that means every time it loops, every time it iterates through the loop, the value of I will increase by 1. Okay? So let's see what this for loop is going to do. Let's copy and paste this text here. So we're going to append some more text to append text. Okay? And let's comment out this while loop for now, just so we don't get confused. Okay, remember how to comment? /*. What's that? Yeah, block comments. Yep. So I've commented out this whole paragraph. So anything between this character and this character is commented out. It's ignored by the computer, right? It's ignored by Visual Studio.
Is there a difference between the // comment and //?
Well, just that // you can comment out blocks of code. // does it line by line. So if I wanted to do this with slashes, I'd have to do this. Right? Which is more of a pain. Or I can just do this. Okay? So, let's go back to our for loop. And so instead of counter, what we're going to put in here is I. Okay? I. And I is just an int variable, just like counter. And so we have to convert it to string. Okay? And so now what's going to happen when we print this, when we start this program, Let's try it. Or is it going to stop? 1,000. Blink.
What's the difference between converting the I to string or not?
Well, append text is a method, and you need to give it a string.
But if I didn't convert it to string, it still could work.
It still works?
Yeah.
Because I believe it'll just, I guess it can do it inherently, because we're concatenating it with the n. I guess it does, but I believe if we take away the n, I don't think it's going to work now. Let's try it. No, see? So it's kind of, by concatenating it with a string, it's converting it to a string. Okay. So can everyone see how the while loop and the for loop, it does the exact same thing. They are the same thing. It's just the for loop, the syntax is laid out a little bit different. A little bit differently. Okay? So let's put the while loop back in. And now let's add some more text. So we could say while loop plus, and in here we'll say for loop plus. Okay. So let's run it, and now we'll hit the button. So this is our while loop running. Now it's our for loop running. Okay.
You just remove the comment?
Yeah, I just put the while loop back in. Right? So that's why sometimes I like, if I'm not too sure if I want to delete code, or I just want to see what happens if I take it out, I just comment it out. It's a little bit easier than deleting, because then it's still there, but it's effectively deleted. Okay. So how are your loops coming, guys?
Everybody have a great loop.
Okay. So let's do a little let's do something fun, and then we'll do a little more. I'll show you a couple more things. We'll do some nested loops. But okay, does everyone know the song 99 Bottles of Beer on the Wall? Okay, let's have a little look here. Some people may not be familiar with this song. Nah, this isn't it. Come on. Let's see. I just want a regular version. This looks regular. Okay, that's not it. How about this guy?
99 bottles of beer on the wall, 99 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 98 bottles of beer on the wall, 98 bottles of beer on the wall, 98 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 97 bottles of beer on the wall, 97 bottles of beer on the wall, 97 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 96 bottles of beer on the wall, 96 bottles.
Okay, you guys getting the idea? You want to listen to the whole song? Okay, so can you guess why I might have brought this song up? What's something? It's repetitive as all hell, right? And it's really annoying. So let's say we wanna create a program that prints out the words to that song. Okay, let's look at the words. What are the words? So here are the words, right? So we want, let's say let's say we're gonna create a program that prints this out. So we could copy and paste this line, right? We could go here. We could say, so let's comment out these loops for now. We could say this. We could say text box 1 dot append text, and then we could say, we could type it out. We could say 99 bottles of beer on the wall, 99 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around, 98 bottles of beer on the wall, right? Then I could do it again. I could copy this line, I could go to the end, paste it, and then I could change this to 98, right? Every line, the number of bottles goes down by 1, right? So 98 bottles, so I could do that again, and I could change this to 97, take one down, pass it around, 97, right? And I could keep doing that, okay? So how many of you think that's the best way, and we should keep doing it this way? No, not the best way, right? This would take a very long time, and there'll probably be some errors. Okay? So let's forget that. We're not going to do that. Okay? So what might I use? What might I use that we've been learning about today to print out the lyrics? A loop, right? What kind of loop do we want? Do we want to use a while loop, or do we want to use a for loop? A for loop. Why do we want to use a for loop? Because we know how many times we want to loop, right? The song's called 99 Bottles of Beer on the Wall. So we probably want to loop 99 times, right? So what would the for loop look like, right? So we're going to start with a for, and let's have our parentheses and our braces, right? So what do we put in our parentheses here? What do we put? Yeah, int I equals excellent 99, right? Excellent, excellent. Now then we're going to have a semicolon. So what comes after the start? Less. So what's less than? I. So I is greater than 0. Right? And then what do we do here? Good. I minus minus. A lot of people don't pick that up. A lot of people get confused, right? So remember, before we put I plus plus here, but we can do anything here. We could say I equals I plus 6. We can do any operation that we want, right? But instead what we're going to do is we're just going to decrement, right? So every time it goes through this for loop, I is going to be I is going to be 1 less. Okay? So let's copy this box here. Let's copy this append text, and we'll put it inside our for loop. Okay? So if I run it now, what's going to happen? Whoops. Actually, let's put a new line character at the end. Okay? And we'll run it. And yeah, I'm going to make mine a little bit bigger so that it can fit all in one. So I'm going to go back to my form. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to make this bigger. Whoop. I'll make this bigger. And then I'll run. Okay, there we go. But see, it's printing it out, but it's not changing my printout. So how do I do that? How might I make it say the right thing for each line? What's that? Yeah, like this, right? We're going to say I plus, and then we're going to get rid of the 99, but we're going to keep our space there, right? So the first time it's going to say I bottles of beer on the wall. Okay? Then what? Then down here, we got to do the same thing. Everywhere it says a number, we have to replace with a variable now. Okay? So now we're going to close that string, and we're going to concatenate I in here, and we're going to concatenate the rest of this string again. So see how we replaced 99 with I. And then we're going to go over here. Now, what do we put here? Minus 1? What do you mean? I minus 1? How come we put I minus 1 there? Because what? Well, because let's go through this. The first iteration is going to be 99. So it's going to say 99 bottles of beer on the wall, 99 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. It should say 98. So how do we get it to say 98? I minus 1. So again, we're going to end this string and begin this string, and we have two plus signs to concatenate, and then we're going to say, we can use brackets and say I minus 1. Okay? Now, I think we're done. So was that easier than printing out 100 lines of code? So let's run it now. Let's see what happens. There we go. Now what if let's add in some if statements now. So the grammar's not quite right here. So it says 1 bottles of beer on the wall, 1 bottles of beer. So how can we make it so that it uses the right, if it makes it plural or not? How could we do that? Sure. I wonder. Yeah, that's okay. Okay, so remember I wanted to see if, so we wanted to make it grammatically correct so that it prints out the right thing when it's only 1 bottle. So what we could say is we could use our if statements, right? We could say if I equals 1, then we'll copy and paste this text and we'll change it to 1 bottle of beer on the wall, 1 bottle of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Yeah. What? Okay, hang on. No bottle of beers left. And then here we'll just create an else statement. Else. So for every other instance, do that. One bottle? What do you mean? If I run this, it's going to say 2 bottles of beer in the wall. Oh, I see. I see what you mean. Okay. Yeah, so you're right. We need another case. Yeah. So else if. So if it equals 2, then here, whoops. Right? Okay. So now we've used the if statements. 1 bottle of beer on the wall. No bottles of beer left. Okay. Two bottle of beer. For this one? Oops.
For else, the last one.
Yep.
And the last sentence.
Oh.
You got it. Here you got S. You got S.
Yeah, here I need S. Oops. No, that's good enough.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. So does everyone have their bottles of beer song printing? Okie doke. So let's look at nested loops now. Okay. So what I'm going to do, well, let's actually, does anyone still not have their bottle of beer is working? Okay. So let's do at least one more thing before we end today. Let's look at nested loop. So I'm going to comment out this stuff, and we'll start at the top here. Okay. So let's say I have a for loop, and I'm going to set the I variable to be 0, and I'm going to say, well, I is less than 10. And I'm going to increment I by 1 every time. Okay, so that's my main for loop. And what I want to do is I'm going to append text. I'll just append I. Okay. So if I run that, then this is what I'm going to have. Now let's say, what if I want to have, if I want to print out the numbers from 0 to 100, but I want them in rows of 10, right? I could do that. I could do that with a single for loop and an if statement. But I'm going to show you how to do stuff like this with 2 for loops. Okay. So let's say we want 10 rows with 10 things in it. Okay. How many? Let's say we have. Let's say in Word, we have a table with 10 rows and 10, or let's say 8 columns. So how many cells do we have in here? 10 rows by 8 columns.
80 cells.
80 cells. Okay. So let's say I'm going to use 2 for loops. I'm going to use nested for loops to process, let's say, or print out data in a table. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have one loop is going to take care of the rows, and another loop is going to take care of the columns. Okay. So what's going to happen is, let's go back to our code. And so this is going to be our outer for loop. Okay, so that's going to, think of it this way. We're going to have 2 loops, and the first loop is going to control which row we're on. Okay, so in the first iteration, the outer loop is going to put us in the first row, and then the inner loop is going to take us across each cell. And then when the inner loop is finished, it's going to go back up to the outer loop, and the outer loop is going to kick us down a row. And then we're going to iterate again with the inner loop across this row. Okay? So what we're going to do is, we already have our outer loop, so now we're going to create our inner loop. Okay? So we're going to create another for statement, and in this case, can I call the variable I again? Yeah, I have to call it j, right? And I'm going to set it to be 0. I can't call it I because I is already defined here. Okay? But the for loop works the same way. So I'll say int j equals 0, Well, j is less than 10, and then j plus plus. Okay? So now that's going to print out 100 things. Okay? So what I'm going to do is each time I go through the for loop, each time I go through the inner loop, I'm going to print one character. So I'm going to say text box 1 dot append, and then I'm going to say print j. And I have to convert it to string. Okay. And then once I'm done this for loop, what I'm going to do is I'm going to append only one character, and that's going to be the next line character. So what do you think that's going to do? What's that going to print out on my screen? Let's see. Let's do it and run it. Okay. See how I have a block of text now? Okay. So let's try, instead of just j, let's do j times I. And that'll give us different values in each row. So let's run that now. Okay, see that? See how it prints out, so 0, 0 for the first row, and then 1 through 9, and then it'd be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 for 2. Right? These are all factors. This is factors of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, and let's add in a space here so we can see it a little bit better. So we'll concatenate a space. Let's run it. There we go. Okay, so let's step through this code. Let's see what's happening. So I'm going to put a breakpoint at the top of my, so this is my outer loop, and this is my inner loop. Okay? Times, it doesn't really matter. I just did something so it would show a different value. You could do plus if you want, see what that comes up with. So the outer loop is I and the inner loop is j. So let's run it and step through and see what happens. Okay, so we're outside of the, this is the first time we're coming in the outside loop. Okay, so we're going to step into the for loop. So I equals 0. I is less, 0 is less than 10. So we're going to go in the first, inside the for loop. And inside the for loop is yet another loop. So now we're going to go inside this loop. So j is equal to 0. Is j less than 10? So let's, so yes, 0 is less than 10. And so now it's going to run this append text. Okay? And it's going to say 0 times 0. Okay? Now let's go to the next step. So now it's going to stay inside the inner loop because we haven't finished this yet. We have to go through this inner loop 10 times. So it's going to append again. Right? And then again. And again. And it's going to go around 10 times in this inner loop until j is equal to 10. Okay? So we're going to go around again, and again, and again, and again. And what's j equal to now? 8. So let's go again. So now j is equal to 9. And now j is equal to 10. So 10 is not less than j. So now we're going to get kicked out of this for loop. Right? We're going to go outside of this. So we're done this loop. We've looped through here 10 times. But we've only looped through this one once. It's only iterated once. We still have 9 times to go. Right? So now we're going to run this line, which is basically the new line character. And then it's going to go up to the top of the for loop. So what's the value of I going to be now? 1. Well, it's going to be 0, but we're still going to run this. And now it's 1. So now we're going to go in here and we're going to run this for loop again. How many times is this for loop going to run? another 10 times. All right? So you see how it's almost like there's almost multiplication going on. When you put a for loop inside a for loop, you're multiplying the number of true iterations is multiplied by the iterations of each loop. Okay? So be careful with nested loops because you can get exponential growth as processing time goes. If you make, like, let's say if I did 1,000 and 1,000, that's going to print out 1,000,000 things, literally, right? Let's see. What? So it's going to go on for a long time, right?
So many zeros, though.
Yeah. So, be careful of nested loops because you can, when you're working with nested loops, you're working with exponential curves, which are a lot steeper than linear curves. Okay? So this will go on and on and on and on until it prints out 1,000,000 figures. Okay? Okay, so how is everyone with loops? Okay, pretty good. So what are our two types of loops that we have available to us? For and while loops. Okay, there's actually a third type that I didn't get into today, just because I've never really used it. Do while. And a do while loop is exactly the same as a while loop, except that it runs through the iteration. It runs this code once before it checks the condition. So I've never really come across an instance where I wanted to use a do while loop because you could probably make your while loop just work the same and just change your conditions a little bit. But that's available to you if you'd like it in there. Another thing with loops that you need to watch out for is when we're using form projects, you probably notice that the form becomes unresponsive. See how you can't really do anything? Oh, shit.
Exercise, exercise, exercise.
It's the lockdown drill. What are we supposed to do? Turn off all the lights? They're already off. Lock the door. Although that door, what good is the locked door going to do?
Attention, attention.
It's got glass.
Lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. There is an emergency on campus. Clear all public areas and secure all rooms and offices. I repeat, lock down the campus. Clear all public areas and secure all rooms.
Guess we're supposed to turn off our monitors.
How many real lockdowns did we ever have?
Well, you could. It happens,
How many have there been?
You ever heard of Virginia Tech?
Yeah.
You heard of Virginia Tech? Yeah, it happens. It's rare, but it happens, Or now, in the States, it seems to even, like a 4-person killing, that's not even a big deal anymore. That doesn't even get reported. It's like 5 or more. Anything less than 5, they're like, ah.
Attention, attention. Lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. There is an emergency on campus. Clear all public areas and secure all rooms and offices. I repeat, lock down the campus. Clear all public areas and secure all rooms.
Okay, I guess class is over. Because we only have 20 minutes left. Let me stop this.
On the assignment.
Okay. Hang on.